So the first thing you've got to address is the data sets itself. How do you make sure that the model that's responding to any queries has access to a broader base of data and not just what's out there in Reddits uh, and social media, right? So that was our first challenge, and that's why we have a continuously augmented database, vector database that's populated with licensed textbooks, articles, and publications. So that's number one. Number two is you can't fix anything. You got to be able to measure something before you can address how you fix it, and that's why bias measurement is such a critical topic. And bias being something that is so subjective, depending on the viewer's eyes and the person that's looking at it, and the context around it, that makes bias very difficult to measure discretely and be able to compare apples to apples. So that's why we created something called the BIQ, the Bias Intelligence Quotient, which takes into account a number of different factors. It takes into account the diversity of the data set, takes into account sentiment analysis tools, which is what most bias detectors use today. They use sentiment analysis tools, which are somewhat flawed in themselves because they were too simplistic, and they assume they take a sequence of words and mark them as positive sentiment or negative sentiment. So you could have a situation where you change a person's name from a male to a female, and the sentiment could go negative. Or you change from a Christian name to a Muslim name, it could go negative, right? So these are biases that are inherent in the system itself. So you can't just go with sentiment analysis tools, which are largely built for product marketing and those sorts of purposes. The third element you got to look at is context. What is the context that those words are being used in? So we take all of those things into consideration, and there's a mathematical formula that we've built, and we run that against Latimer versus GPT and have the scores, bias scores. And what we saw was that for questions related to race or questions related to gender, specifically where there was potential for bias, Latimer behaved significantly better, answered significantly better, more contextually than GPT did. So our hope is to be what we're looking at is to do two things. One is build a bias detection, a universal bias score that any company and any LLM can use and say, hey, here's where you are on the thing, and then the user can then determine whether a particular response is usable or not usable, or whether they need to tweak it.